private practice because I like seeing the same patients over and over again, seeing them like develop from young to like adult years, and because I'm a huge advocate for early intervention and prevention.
Okay. Ooh, awesome. Next we have Aiden. Aiden, if you can hear me, it's your turn. If not, say nothing and then we'll move to the next person. Okay. Dominique, are you there? Can you hear me? Let's see. Malia.
Hi everyone, my name is Malia. My goal currently is to attend a four-year university and then eventually go to PA school.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that concludes everybody's introduction. So thank you all for sharing. And it looks like we got the PowerPoint.
You got it? Okay, good. So that was actually perfect. So I just showed you how failure can really make things better, because on the first computer, I failed to be able to share my screen. And actually on the second computer, I failed to share my screen until I went back into Zoom and accepted it, because I just did all the updates. So in the amount of time I learned about you guys, I learned about two budding researchers, a veterinarian, a med tech, and some really passionate physicians that spanned neurology, pediatrics, and someone who is going to get domestic violence and sexual abuse resources expanded for everybody. So this is really exciting because I feel I know you guys better, and I can really talk to how failure is going to benefit all of you. And I know that sounds weird, but when you think about it, what is failure? Failure is just a lack of success, right? So how do we succeed if not by learning? So we have failures. I have failures every day. I just failed today, you know, but it came out well. I fail every day, and sometimes it's in small ways where I lack the courtesy to start a meeting with saying, let's introduce ourselves, because I'm very business oriented. I'm very, not business, but I like to get down to the work, you know, get it over, just get it done. And so I forget often to do the niceties and say, how is everybody today? And so now I can laugh about that. I can start a meeting and I can say, okay, let's do this. And then I go, oh, wait a minute. I forgot to do the niceties. Let's all go around and say what went well for us today. So I'm able to laugh at myself for my apparent failures, which, you know, they actually get a lot done. So they're not really failures. So I also want you guys to think of your biggest failures and how they actually help you. Little failures, big failures, everything. So when you say, oh, to yourself or to someone else, I failed, think about that and think about how it is helping you or how it could help you, because they will all help you. So what does failure really mean to you? It just means that you've overcome something. And you know the song, I forget which song it is, it says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, you might live with the scars, but you will learn from your mistakes if you let yourself. So even the lion learns from mistakes. Mr. Honda, I won't try to pronounce his first name, but it is of Honda Motor Company, said success is 99% failure. And we know he was successful. So I want you to think of failure just as a step towards success. So I know some of you do research, because I heard a couple of budding researchers there. And so the research method has many, many steps to it, but the data collection process is probably the biggest, hardest step. So what you do is you set up a method, you do your research, you create your theory, your hypothesis, you design it, you've looked at what everybody else has done, you put everything in motion, and then you fail. I mean, basically that's it. The researchers we got in the group, tell us, on your first experiment, did you succeed? I'm going to assume that's a no. Oh, Cherry succeeded. Okay, well, you're lucky because there's going to be a lot of experiments where you fail. And just to use what we've done recently, so we've got COVID-19 going around, and initial first theories were that hydroxychloroquine worked because we found in some small areas where people used it, they survived better. But we just did a big study and it showed it didn't work. So actually the failure gave us information that that wasn't the right way to go about it. And even Elon Musk, who just sent the first private company's rocket up into space, he said failure is an option here, always an option. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. And we know he innovated enough because I guess in college, which I think he dropped out of, or did he, I can't remember, but he said there are 5 things the world needs. We need an easy way to exchange money. So he created PayPal, got rich. We need to go back into space, which he just did. We need not to rely on gas and oil, which he created Tesla. And then there were a couple, we need to sequence the human genome, which is being done, but he admitted it was a lot for him. And then there's one other thing. I think it was making computing easy. Anyway, he said 5 things and he's going after them or supporting them. But he knows that failure is always there. It has to be. And so with perspective, this is a young researcher. I can see that my experiments weren't failures. I learned a lot, including precision and importance of clean technique and how to develop alternative approaches, how to have plan B. And I learned persistence and resilience in the face of discouragement. And these are things that I rely on every day. To try a grant application, to summon the courage to contact a potential collaborator, to reformat my rejected manuscript. Those are all hard things to do, but I'll tell you, I wrote my first grant in 1998, I think. And it was a big undertaking because everybody said, oh, grant writing is so scary. And I wrote it and I spent hundreds of hours on it probably. And I didn't get it. And they gave me feedback. And they said, you did not have the support of your dean. And so I went and met with the dean and I wrote another grant and I said, I would like a letter of support from you. And he said, of course. And because I went and met with him, he called me up a few months later and he said, I've got this program that's failing and I think you'd be the one to take it over. And it's the Area Health Education Center. And that's what I do now. And I've built on that. And now I brought in $46 million or something because every grant I write now, my biggest strength is my letters of support. Because I failed on that first grant. Now I know how to do letters of support really well. And I've conquered it to even asking a collaborator for support. I write the letter for them. And they say, oh, that was the easiest letter I've ever written. And that's how I get. I've gotten 50 letters of support for a grant before, which is crazy. I have a friend that says, I couldn't believe how many pages of letters of support you had. There are probably too many, but oh well. So I never made that mistake again. I learned from it and it made me much stronger. So that's research. There's a Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Because all you have to do is get back up from that failure and you are a success. So how can failure help us? Well, I'm going to talk about 2 companies. Has anybody on the line ever heard of Blockbuster? We used to go there and get videos in person, and you could rent game machines, you could rent games. Maybe you guys are too young to have heard about it because it folded. Because their shareholders said, we're not going to stop. They were told you need to get rid of the physical tapes and the physical presence and the physical store. And they said, no, we make 40% of our money in overdue fees. And because they wouldn't get rid of the physical presence and they wouldn't adapt to the changing times, they're now gone. Whereas on the right, this is a BlackBerry. Has anybody ever heard of a BlackBerry? Yeah. Well, there was a time about 15 years ago where BlackBerry got the contract with the US government. Every US official had to have a BlackBerry. And I actually like the BlackBerry because it's got keys. You can like feel them and you can type. So you can actually type blindfolded, which some of you can do on your iPhone. I know I can't, but you could type things out and I could use both thumbs. So it was really pretty fast. And I really liked it. But they had the US government contract. They were rich. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to innovate. So guess what happened? They went downhill fast because iPhone and Samsung, they all came out with their new phones, new gadgets, and BlackBerry was just obsolete. But BlackBerry has now changed. You can see their newest BlackBerry. You can still type. I think it might be too small for me to do 2 thumbs on there. But I just looked them up yesterday and they are now the big stock to buy because now they're on the recovery path because they have adapted. So failure actually keeps us thinking about ourselves and what we can do better. What can we improve? What can we, we don't want to get stagnant. We don't want to get complacent. We don't want to say, oh, you know what? I'm really good at biology, so I'm not going to study that at all. I'm not even going to refresh it for my MCAT. I'm going to leave that alone, which is usually right, but you always want to refresh. You don't want to get complacent. All right, let's see here. So failure teaches us lessons. It can make us more efficient. It can teach us what not to do because it didn't work that time. So always learn from your failures. I tell my kids, if they make a mistake, I said, yeah, but did you learn from it? And if they say, no, I didn't learn anything, it wasn't my fault, I go, oh no, go back to that again. You must have learned something from it. And so I don't consider anything a failure as long as I learn from it. So what else do our failures do? They help us build character. They help us become more resilient. And they help us become more creative because we have to find another way. So let's see. Who said this? I can't remember. Where did I put that quote? Anyway, anyone can be a hero in easy times, but who can stand up to failure in the future? So when you do have a failing, which I would just say a challenge overcome, take a moment and think about it before you consider it an actual failure. Because there are no actual failures, there's only learning opportunities. Having these experiences though, and being able to overcome them and learn from them and appreciate them makes you a stronger person, makes you able to do it in the future. And I'll give you an example of, in medical school, in the hospital, there are rounds. So you go patient to patient. Right now you probably don't, but you might do out of the hall. And you do it as a group, and you have an attending who is the big boss. And it used to be, I think it's getting better these days, but it used to be that that attending used to try and humiliate you. So used to call on you, what does this patient have? And if you said it wrong, they would say, you're wrong. And some of them might even be so bold as to say, that is a failing on your part. You need to study this harder, or something very harsh. They were very, very harsh. So if you've never overcome a public failure like that, if you've never fallen down in front of all your classmates or done something completely embarrassing where you're just humiliated, you won't know what to do. And you'll probably start to tear up and just feel just terrible. But if you've gone through this before and you've been embarrassed in public, you can hold yourself up straight, and then you can learn from that. And you can know that next time something like that happens, you will tell what's going on, tell what you're thinking. So even if they make fun of you, you will say, I believe this patient has this because of this and this. And what I know is this. And they can say, well, you don't know enough. And you can say, you're right. I'm going to go study that. Thank you. And it's just a totally different dynamic because they can't humiliate you if you don't let them. And so I'm hoping that doesn't happen in medical school as much as it used to, but it's something that you need to have experienced to be able to deal with it. Okay, so how does this make you better? So we don't just have one chance at things in life. Even on that attending's rounds, you will be on rounds with that attending again, and you will do things differently. And the attending will probably say, well done. So there are many ways to get things done. If you can't do it one way, how do you do it? And failure helps you think through things more creatively. So I'll give you an example. I remember in 12th grade, I was in an advanced Spanish class, and we only spoke in Spanish, and I was trying to say something. And I could not remember the words to say what I was trying to say. So instead, I went about it the long way. And instead of saying something like, he came to the church through the woods, or whatever it was, I said, he walked a roundabout way to come to the building where they had faith, or something like that. And it was completely ridiculous to me. It was too many words. But the teacher said, yes, you got there through a longer path, an uncomfortable path, but you got there. So that is success, is getting where you want to be. So just because you can't do it one way, you're going to think of another way to do it, and you won't be wrong. So it also drives us to achieve. So the best way to use failure is to help you do it better next time. As I said, to learn from it. It's if you fail and you just want to go hide, you don't want to go back on rounds, you want to quit medicine. That is not the path to take. The path to take is to learn from it and to talk to people. So you talk to your intern and you say, did you ever have that happen to you? And they'll be like, oh yeah, and it was the same guy. And here's what I did. And so you can learn from that, and you can learn from other people, as long as you're not so embarrassed that you can't talk about it. Don't be embarrassed. There's no embarrassment to failure. Failure is human, and it's the only way eventually we succeed. Okay, so I want to talk about fear a little bit, because a lot of times what is driving us to call something a failure is fear that we will never succeed. And that's not the case as long as we stand up and try it again. So if we stay stuck in something, like say we don't apply to med school, say we're afraid, so we'll say, oh, we'll just do it next year. I tell people, don't do that. Just do it. Just don't expect to get in. Just do it. Go through the process and do it, because you'll be less afraid next time. You'll know what to expect. Even if you only apply to one school. And I tell them, you know, the chances of you getting in the first time are really, really, really small. It would be great, but don't expect it. But just go through the motions so you've done it before. Excuse me. So, how will it help you in professional school? Well, I just told you about how it will help on rounds when somebody's trying to intimidate you. Because old school medicine was all about who can survive and who's the toughest. And so they're always trying to intimidate you. It's not so much like that anymore, luckily. But I'll tell you about the time I failed physiology. So it was the first year of med school, and it's not like that. It's not like this at JABSOM. So I went to UC San Diego, and we had large lecture classes all week long. And it was the second semester of medical school. And over Christmas break, my boyfriend from college and I had broken up. So I was feeling down. So I got back, and my friends from med school, we had a class of 100, would take me out and do fun things so that I wouldn't feel down. And in retrospect, I realized different friends took me out every night of the week. So I went out all the time, and they went out one night of the week. So guess what? I didn't study very much, and I failed. And that was hard for me to take, because I hadn't failed a class before. It was really, you know, it was a shocker. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be a doctor, my lifelong dream. But they let me retake it over the summer, and I did it, and I studied, and I learned physiology even better than I would have had I squeaked by and passed. I know it way better now. And having had that failure and knowing I could succeed, yes, I was scared all summer. I was scared I would have to repeat a year. I was scared that I would be embarrassed in front of my classmates. But you know what? I passed, and I was with my classmates, and some of them knew. I mean, anybody who asked me what I did this summer, I said I retook physiology. They knew, because I realized I made a mistake not managing my time better, and I learned from that. So, you're afraid, yes. We all have fear, and that's normal, and that's pushing us to do what we want to do in life. Oops. But let's talk a little more about fear. Okay, so fear of failure is even worse than the failure itself. We can live through the failure, but if we let the fear prevent us from acting, that's it. That's the end of it. So J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter series, was a single mother with no job, no money, and wrote Harry Potter on napkins at a coffee shop. She says it's impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. So she was rejected by, numerous publishers, I believe. And here she is now, quite the opposite. So what you want to do is face your fear. Gandhi, who is the ambassador of peace, says that the enemy is fear. We think it is hate, but it is fear. Because when you think about fear, what's under that? It's often hatred. Or no, when you think about hate, what's under that? And it's usually fear. So when you think about, when you think about the police officer who put his knee on someone's neck and killed him, he was probably afraid of that person, but probably because he probably hated a whole group of people because of fear of them. So fear does a lot of things to us that we don't want to let it do. So don't let your fear rule you. There isn't an all or nothing. If you don't get into med school or vet school or pass your test for lab tech this time, that's not the end of the process. You just do it again. You just stand up one more time. So here's a couple people who failed. Steven Spielberg failed 3 times to get into film school. But in my opinion, he's written and directed the best movies in the world. So Steve Jobs, he flunked out of college. Actually, I don't know if he flunked. Yeah, well, he dropped out. He created an amazing company and then they fired him. But if they didn't fire him, we wouldn't have iPhones. We wouldn't have Pixar movies. So he admits that it was the best thing that could have happened to him because it made him more creative. He went out and went back to the drawing board and started creating things again, which is what he's so amazing at. It's maybe not an amazing businessman, but he's an amazing creator. So I need some help. This is so small that my old eyes can't read it. So can I ask some of you to read it? Let's see, can I ask Caden to read the first line?
In other words, when we respond by saying, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake, this was my fault. I see where things went wrong," that sort of thing, failure acts like one of life's best teachers. We learn from our mistakes and move on.
Thank you. Well done. Do people agree with that? So you're not hiding under the covers. You're admitting you made a mistake. And you know what? When you say that, if you fight with somebody and you say, no, you, and then they fight back and they say, you, that just goes on. But if you say, you know what? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. That often just stops the whole conflict. And you can talk and you can be introspective. And so really when you get that situation, think about what's going on and think about nothing's ever your own responsibility only, but take responsibility for your part and then you can learn from it. Let's see, does anybody want to go next? How about Kelly?
Because we can only receive what failure has to teach us. If we are willing to fully embrace the failure itself, when we're willing to accept that fact that failure occurred, you also get the positive lesson failure teaches.
Thank you. What do you guys think about that? Positive lessons that failure teaches. So really, you're the only one can learn for yourself. People can lecture at you a lot, but you have to incorporate it into your memory and who you are. So if you're going to say that I don't even want to think about that, you're not going to incorporate the lessons from failure. So use that failure as a teacher. So who's next? How about Kuipo?
Failure teaches us that real success, rarely comes in the form of a big break. More often than not, it comes after months, even years of hard work.
Boy, that's true for vets, for med techs, for medicine, for especially for research. You know, success builds on failure after failure after failure. So yes. Anybody want to volunteer to read? Good, go ahead. Selena, did I say it right?
Yes. Failure teaches to try many avenues before giving up on reaching a goal, because usually there is more than one way to get there.
Exactly. So like I said, just think through it and find another way. All right, who wants to read next? Anne, do you want to read?
Sure. Failure teaches us not to trust everyone who says they are out to help us. It teaches us to trust that gut feeling, the intuitive sense inside of us.
Yes. So you're all young, so you may not feel you can trust what your mind tells you, but I can tell you that I'm not as young, and there's a lot of gut feeling that goes on in medicine, but also on test taking. So I have realized that after a lot of years of test taking, when I think I know the right answer, it's usually the right answer, and I can't reason it out. I know I've learned it somewhere, and I just think, oh, that's the right one. And so I'm going to give you a few test taking tips here. One of them is if you feel like it's right, just choose it and go on. Another one is if you have absolutely no idea and you're feeling overwhelmed by this test question, I'm going to tell you that they put some questions on there just to do that to you. So I pick a letter, and I like B personally. I pick B and I go on. If I have no idea about a question, I just pick B, I go on, and I feel so much better because I didn't fail that. I got 20% chance of getting it right. And I just go on and I use my time when I can reason things out. And then in that vein, if I get it down to 2, I pick the top one and I just go on. Because that way I got 50% chance of getting it right, and I have time to do the questions that I can reason out. So my point in that is, people are putting things in front of you for you to fail, but not to take them as failures. Just to do your best, and that for me is B. I just do B and I just go on. All right, let's see. How about Gazarelle? Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, just gaze.
Gaze, nice.
Yes. Some failures are bigger than others. Some are more public than others. Some are more humiliating. Some have a greater stigma around them. But learn to own your failures, admit them, and even embrace them. You are more likely to get the results you want.
Okay, speaking of that, I want to tell you about a doctor who wasn't a doctor when I knew her. She worked for me, and she got into a post-bac program for medical school. And she came to me about a half a year later, and I said, oh, how are you doing? And she said, I dropped out. And I said, what happened? And she said, I got anxious, I got depressed, and I just couldn't do it. And I said, oh no. And so she came back and she worked for me again. But I said, you know what? She said, do you think I can reapply? And I said, absolutely. Because your anxiety and your depression that you now have overcome are not a failure. They are what is going to make you an excellent physician, because you are going to understand how people feel that are in that situation. And probably 20% or more of people, especially right now, probably 50% of people have anxiety and or depression. And so she has a special skill. Having been there, she can experience true empathy. So she rewrote her letters, she rewrote her essays, and she emphasized this. She emphasized her failing. She failed out of a post-bac program. She was in medical school and she failed, but she failed in getting life experiences that will help her be a better doctor. So she reapplied and she got back in and she got through. And I think she's an excellent doctor now, because if I went to her and explained how I felt anxious, she would know what I was talking about. So that's how you use your failings to help you get into med school, help you be a better doctor. All right, let's see here. Okay, so failure makes us more valuable. The most qualified teachers are those who've been through it all and know how to weather it. A large part of mentorship, so the best mentors are helping anticipate and avoid pitfalls, stay focused, and respond to challenges with creativity and optimism. So if you guys have a failure, or I don't even want to call it failure, you have a challenge that you don't think you did as well on as you could have, would you rather talk to a friend who's never done it before, who's gotten straight A's, perfect test scores, everything? Or would you rather talk to someone who's been there, down there in the weeds too, who knows how you feel? My guess is probably weeds. Yes, weeds. How you feel. So I would say the best doctors are the ones who understand you and who have gone through failing and experienced things that we consider failure, but really aren't. And so here's something you don't know. Med schools look for students who have overcome failure, because they know in medical school you are going to face failure. You are going to be in a very difficult situation with a whole bunch of straight A students, and you're not going to be the best. And so they don't want people who just sailed through everything. They want someone who's been tested, who's been down, who's got back up, because that's what you're going to have to do a lot. I mean, when a patient dies on you, so I started residency and they said, in your life as a doctor, you're going to kill a patient. And I was like, what? And knock on wood, I haven't done it yet. But just knowing that that's going to happen, you need to have a lot of fortitude, because you're not perfect. And the medical system is not perfect. And so you need to be able to deal with that. Okay. Here's an equation that a runner made. The value of a fail is the time invested times the effort invested times the preparation invested. So the more you put into something, the bigger the fail, the more value it is. All right, so keep that in mind. And then these are some really famous people who have failed. So Einstein, they thought he was an idiot. They didn't even want to advance him in school, but he was just a different thinker, ahead of his time. Walt Disney, they said he was lacking in imagination. Oh my goodness. And Oprah, she wasn't fit for television. Give me a break. And then Michael Jordan, I didn't know this, that he was cut from his high school basketball team. What the heck? And Steve Jobs, we already talked about him. And then the Beatles, I didn't know this either, but they were rejected because they didn't like their sound. Well, I bet they feel bad about that. So don't let any rejection get you down. Okay, so we had some questions, and these were similar. Oh, not these two, but how can we change in order to avoid failures from happening? Well, what do you guys think I'm going to say about this? Don't change. Let them happen. Learn from them and become a stronger person. How can you better identify habits that work and habits to change? Well, I'll tell you a story. In my med school, we had 9 days to study for part 1 of the USMLE boards. So at JABSOM, you have 3 months, which is lovely. In my school, we had 9 days. So on the first day, I got to the library with my study books, my study questions, and I sat down and I panicked. I was so overwhelmed to learn 2 years of material, and you have to pass this test to go on, or you're all embarrassed in front of all your friends and you have to skip a year, and you know, I was overwhelmed. I was paralyzed. I couldn't do anything. So I took a big breath. I took a lot of breaths, and I made a list of the things that were most important for me to study, the things I wanted to practice the most. And I just broke it down, and I did a little bit at a time. And every morning I got that panic, but I went back to the list and I did what I could. And I didn't get through all the books, and I didn't get through all the test questions, but I did well enough on the boards to go to the next year and get into residency. So even though I was that panicked, I stopped and I made a list that I could break it down into smaller pieces. So how can you better identify habits that work and habits to change? So you can talk to people about it, people who've done it before. You can look at what you've done in the past and what works for you and doesn't. And I hate to say make a to-do list, because some people hate the to-do list, but I like the to-do list. But I also know I make my to-do list too long. So now my to-do list cannot be more than 1 page of paper. And sometimes it's packed, but it can't be longer than this, because I won't get it done. And then I'll feel bad. I didn't do everything on my to-do list. And I know that's a challenge I have every day. And so my lists are much shorter now, but I often get them done, not always. Okay, other questions? Okay, how can I better my GPA when I've gotten C's in the past? Okay, so this is a fairly common question, and it is a challenge. Med schools look at the college you went to, so they know that, for example, Stanford inflates their grades. They know almost everybody at Stanford gets A's and B's. So if you have a 4.0 from Stanford, it's not worth as much as if you have a 4.0 from Manoa, because they know that. They have statistics for the colleges all across the country. They also look at your science GPA compared to your other GPAs, and they look at your process through school. So say you had a hard time adapting to college and you got bad grades initially, or you were in the Hawaii club and they know this, and your sophomore year you had to put on the luau so your grades go down. They know that that is a Hawaii issue, and they look at that. Another way, so you can explain your grades. Let's say you had, I had a mentee who while in college had a family death and had to go home and take care of that and had a very bad semester. You can explain that, and you can explain what you learned about it. I have had mentees who just had changed schools and had a really hard time, and I had them explain what learning from failure meant in their life, in their essay. The other thing you can do is you can go to graduate school, because they average all your grades. So if you go to graduate school, usually in graduate school you get A's, and that will average your grades. And if it's a science graduate school, that goes into your science GPA. So that's probably the easiest way to bring up your GPA, is graduate school, but then explain it as well. How do you gain back your self-confidence after failure? Well, this is where you talk to people, you learn from it, you make changes, you understand it better, you admit your part in it, and you figure out how to avoid that same mistake again. So, on the question of how to boost morale after failure, I would say know yourself, know what you're going after, and know that you're often going to fail. So that when you do fail, take it as part of life. It is part of life, and we have to fail to succeed. So this is just another little piece of my life that I won't even think about in a few years, but it will help me grow. Any questions or comments about that? All right. How to assess failure on medical school applications. Okay, so I tell everybody, don't expect to get in the first time, not even the second time necessarily, especially to JABSOM, because JABSOM likes very mature students. JABSOM likes students who've had real life experience and know how to overcome failures. They like students who've done Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, worked as a medical assistant or a scribe, and have seen medicine in action. Because one of the questions I always ask my applicants that interview with me is, what do you know about the downsides of medicine? Because there are a lot of downsides, and they're getting even more and more. And so it's a long course to get yourself through. And if you don't know what you're getting into, you might not want to do it at all. So I would definitely not expect to get in the first time or the second time, and do it as practice. In fact, I say take the MCATs the first time as practice. Don't worry about your score. Just go through and say, oh, this is what they ask. This is how they do it. Oh, I don't know this one, B. So, you know, don't take it too seriously, because life is long. I rushed through everything. I rushed through medicine. I had friends in my medical school class who were doing an MD PhD program, which takes 2 years longer. And I said to them, why would you want to wait one more day before seeing patients? And the joke's on me now, because I went back to school and got my PhD after 20 years of being an MD. And now I do research and clinical. And so after 20 years of being a doctor, I realized that I could help people one at a time in the office, which is a wonderful feeling, working with people and helping them, until they get mean or mad, or, you know, one bad patient can ruin your whole day, even though you had 20 other great patients. But that's something for me to look at as well. So after 20 years of doing that, I realized, you know, I want to help more than just one person at a time. I want to help larger groups of people. I want to help the whole state have enough doctors to serve us in the future. And so I went back and got my PhD. So what I'm telling you, the reason I'm telling you this is, you probably, after 20 years of being a doctor, you might be bored. So don't rush into it. Get life experiences now that you may not be able to get later on. You may not be able to understand or do things that you can do now later on when you have a practice, or you're committed, or you have a family. So this is your time in life to explore things you're interested in, and that'll make you a more rounded applicant to medical school. Do you guys have questions or comments on that? Let's see, scan through folks. All right. How to show credibility, accountability after failure. That goes to my employee who is now a doctor, but had the biggest failure, failed out. So no failure is worthless. You have not wasted your time. And you can show how the challenges you faced have made you a stronger person and will make you a better doctor. So I had one other applicant who, first time she applied, she didn't get in. She was, she had been in a career already in the sciences, but she had had a death in the family that had impacted her and made her want to go to medicine. And I said to her, well, did you tell them about the death in the family? And she said, no, I couldn't talk about it. And I said, well, that's how you're going to get into medical school. And I said, this sounds really callous of me to say, but you need to be able to talk about it, because that's what changed who you are to want to pursue medicine. And so she did. She had to practice, because she cried the first few times she talked about it, just outright cried. And I said, you know what, that's okay. In your interview, that's okay to cry. But by the time she had her interview, she didn't cry. She got choked up, she said, which is completely acceptable. But just being able to explain what makes her special, what makes her strive to know and to help people through the process of cancer, was really helpful for her application, and she got in second time around. Is it really okay to get choked up or cry during an interview? Yes, because it shows you're human and it shows what you really care about. I would say, because you might not want to do it in your interview, that you practice enough that you're able to just get choked up. And you can say, you know, I'm really choked up. I just want to take a couple breaths. Because even doing that in an interview is showing them you know how to deal with stress. And that's another question I always ask my applicants. How do you deal with stress? And I'll give you one tip on that, how you deal with that, and it's in your breathing. Because in any situation, you can stop and take a breath. And there's different methods for breathing. People will tell you, breathe into the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 3, I forget. But one I remember because it's balanced is box breathing. So you breathe in, 1, 2, you hold it for 2, then you breathe out, 1, 2, and then you hold the expiration for 2. And you just do that a few times and it slows down your heart rate, slows down your breathing, calms you down. So you can even practice doing that in general life anytime. It's just, and I always ask the med students this, do you think that breathing slower relaxes you, or does relaxing you make you breathe slower? And there's no right answer because they both do the same thing. So this will slow you down enough. And I always tell people in your interview, just be honest. You know, if you're really nervous, it's your first interview, say, you know, I'm really nervous. And they'll say, I know how it is. And just by saying that, you're admitting your failure and you're going on and you're showing them how you can deal with it. So yes, it is absolutely okay to get choked up, even to cry in your interview. Let's see here. And I did get the other question. Who would be good people for letters of support? And Blockbusters is life. Yeah. So letters of support, at least a couple instructors, a boss, a research mentor if you have it, somebody that's, if there's a doctor that's known you for a long time, that's a good person. You want a couple of the science instructors should be a couple. You could get an English teacher, any kind of mentor in a volunteer experience, anybody who knows you well. So the question to ask is, can you write me a really strong letter of support? You don't just want a letter of support, you want a really strong letter of support. Have they seen you fail and get back up? You know, and if you had a big failure in life, have somebody write the letter that has seen you overcome that, because that is super important, as I explained, to the admissions committee. So your pastor who's seen you through life overcome things, a long-term mentor, and any of those people, and you want a good mix. You want 5 to 7, a good mix of people. Does that answer that one? Just stop me or chat. Okay. Oh, and another question was, what are some books that I would recommend? Now, I haven't read most of these. I have read Who Moved My Cheese? And it's not just about failure, but it's a way to think about life differently, in that it's not all what we think in life. And it's just fun. It's a short read that's really fun. These other ones are highly recommended. So I would say if you are interested in this, go with that. There's a lot online. I found a lot of the quotes online. But what I want to convey to you is that there really are no failures. There's nothing to overcome, because failure is life. Every day I fail at something, whether it's talking to my 20-year-old son the right way. Yesterday I learned that if I don't hear him properly, I don't repeat what he said. I say, can you repeat that, please? And so we have a new agreement. And I learned, because I'm not afraid to confront. And I say, you know, I feel like I'm not communicating with you. What am I doing wrong? And he'll tell me. I might not always like it, but he'll tell me. All right, and Sherry says, yes, that helps. Thank you, and I'm currently working on grants. So this is so helpful because I've been getting rejected and no one has ever said this before. Oh, Sherry, if you want to email me, I have to tell you, I love writing grants. And I know this is weird. People say, oh, that's so weird. But writing grants for me is like telling a story. It's like my creative outlet. It's like a fairy tale, because I tell how awful it is. This is the worst place in the world for this, for substance use, for meth use. We are the worst place in the world. And yet I have this idea that will help. And I have this great group of people who've all written letters of support. And this is what we can do. And so even if I fail in getting to that objective, I've explained the process to the grant makers, and they believe in me and my team and the situation and the solution. So just email me, Cherry. I love writing grants. So I think with this, oh, okay, here's a few processes. What are some exercises we can use when we hit a challenge, a wall? So organization and time management. It's always good to be able to manage your time. And that's something that medical school applicants want, or interviewers want to know, because you're going to have, you cannot learn all there is to know about the human body, much less all the medicines and procedures that are out there. You need to learn a certain amount and know where to go to figure that out. So when you're in a room with a patient or a pet, somebody's pet, and they ask you a question and you say, and it's okay to say this, I don't know, but I'm gonna go find out and we'll learn this together. And that's very intimidating for a lot of doctors to say, because they've been taught they have to be perfect. But is anybody perfect? No. So it's okay to admit your shortfalls as long as you want to make them better. And patients really appreciate that. Meditation, I think, is really helpful for opening up creative channels, reinvesting in yourself, calming yourself down. So that's something really good to look into. There's different meditation techniques. Identifying your life's purpose. So let's say you take the MCATs and you didn't get as good a score as you wanted, but you have a goal. You have a goal to be a pediatrician, to be a neurologist. You have a goal, and you know that's what you're good at, and you know that's what you're going to do. So this is just one learning process in your life. Positive self-talk. So if you guys listen to yourself, you might hear some of the very tough things that we tend to say to ourselves, things that other people would never say to us. So so something that I heard when I was young that I internalized is, nobody will like you. Nobody's going to like you. And I know tough family members said that to me. If you don't wear this or act this way, nobody's going to like you. Well, I know that's not true, but that's what comes into my head. So I have to say, when I think, so for a while I was going around thinking, oh, that person doesn't like me. But that's never totally true. That person may respect my skills at this and this, but maybe not like my process of doing this or this. You know, I might be too, some people have said uppity, but you know what? I am uppity, and that's just the way it is. So I'm not going to take that as a criticism. And I know they don't like that about me, but they might like how effective I am at writing grants. So there is no black and white there. So when I hear myself, or when I get that feeling like nobody likes me, I have to tell myself, no, they like certain things about you. They might not like that about you. You don't even know what they're thinking. So you can't assume nobody likes you. And then box breathing, we talked about that. Any kind of breathing techniques are really helpful to calm you down in any situation. When you're studying for a test, when you're in a test, when you're in an interview, when you're sitting down to write your essay, any of these things, it can help. And I think, okay, so Robert Kennedy said, only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. And of course, his brother said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And then J.K. Rowling again, at the end, so she gave an address to her Harvard graduating class, and she said at the end, I wish you all the benefits of failure, because failure really has a lot of benefits to it. So that's all I've got. Let's see what time it is. Oh, other questions, ideas, comments?
Okay, with that, I think that's it.
All right.
Okay, so thank you so much, Kelly, for speaking with us today. I hope everyone got something and understands that failure is normal, like Dr. Withy said, and it's how we move through it and apply it to our lives. So yay. I will put, if Kelly's comfortable, I can put the PowerPoint and send it to everyone too as well. So
absolutely, yes. There is no failure. There is only success after many failures. Oh, thank you for the thank you. And so if anybody wants to practice interviewing, I told you some of the questions I ask, but there's more just to elicit how you deal with stress. I give you a stressful situation to explain. And even writing essays can be very stressful, but I always tell people, pretend you're not writing about yourself, pretend you're writing about your friend, and write all the good things. And then think of one maybe surprising comment or interaction you had that changed your life or made you make the decision to go where you're going, or maybe your life plan, and put that up first so you grab their attention. Anyway, so through PHCC, we can help you write your essays, we can help you interview, so you don't have to be so stressed out about that. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Yay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Witty
Thank
and
you.
Joey. Bye.
Thanks.